Now, it is my honor to hand over the mic to our next fantastic artists. We are thrilled to present Mike Uwandi and Christina Diem Pham of the 9B Collective. Take it away.
Awesome.
Outstanding. You're lost.
Pants.
Oh, you goddamn right. I want to be counted. Do that shit, do that shit, do it. I say when I die.
Oh, was that a threat?
Some of us could be killed. Welcome back.
Hello, everyone. Ooh, my voice, my goodness. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Diem Pham. I am a creative producer with 9B Collective, the first Black-owned concept art studio. And I am here with Mike Uwandi, incredible concept artist, illustrator, designer, also a co-founder of 9B Collective. Mike, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Are you talking that voice the whole time?
All right, I think we are. You know, it just came out last week, so I guess that's what it is.
I mean, today we're going to talk about a day in the life of a concept artist, and there's definitely some irony there because normally Mike would not be up at 9 a.m. doing art for sure.
Definitely not.
But we are here to spend time with y'all, and he's super stoked to pretty much do an art demo. Can we talk about, like, Mike, what can people expect for this next 90 minutes?
Something they can expect is a lot of weird jokes, a few different tangents, and I think like a lot of light and color talk. One of the things that me and Christina talked about earlier was I had a friend by the name of Brandon Lane, Brandonian Syndrome on Instagram, who last night said I have to bring the chicken back. So I am going to do a design inspired by just that. But our job is to make things cool. So that's going to be the fun part is how do you take that idea and make it cool or different? So it'll be a little bit of that, a little bit of painting, a lot of bit of painting, and a little bit of color and light. And just fun conversation. So hopefully you guys feel free to talk and ask all the questions, everything, whether it's about technique, whether it's about job, whatever.
Yeah, please ask all the questions. We'll try to get through as many as we can. And just for context, the people who have no idea what you're talking about in terms of bringing back the chicken, what is the story behind this?
So yesterday we had a drawing jam. It was me, Carla Ortiz, Kay Asadera, Philip Boutte, Imogene Chaez, and I forgot the last person. But basically I started off drawing a chef, and then I don't know why, but then Carla Ortiz started drawing a chicken, but then we started nerding out on Final Fantasy. And so she started to make it into a Cloud Stripe chicken, then a Tifa chicken. Then we started to move into another drawing panel, and we were drawing costumes. And then I brought the chicken back on that one. And then she started jumping in, and then Chaos Adera jumped in as well, designing chickens into our cool costumes. So this time we have to do it again because why not? So
you got to bring it home on the last day. So definitely, yeah. For anyone who joined that costume design drawing jam, it was just pure chaos of chickens on chickens on chickens. And you can check out 9B Collective's Instagram stories at 9B Collective for a few of the highlights of the chickens and chicky chaos.
Chicky chaos.
Oh yeah. Why don't you go ahead and get started, and we'll see what questions we've got.
Right. Cool. So as you can see here, I have an inspiration image, but what you don't see on this screen here, let me bring it over, is I also have pictures of chicken, just to keep the inspiration going. Another thing that I oftentimes do is I have my navigation board, so I can see what my image looks like. And by surprise, I'm oftentimes looking more at this navigation screen than I am my actual painting. And I move my navigation screen not to the next screen, but the screen over. So usually when I'm painting, I'm not looking directly, I'm looking here the whole time, just to see what the image is looking like small. And usually I'll keep my main screen in value, which is black and white. What else you see here is the palette. So we know chickens tend to be white and red. So I kept it on one side, my colors in light, which I'm imagining will be affected by blue light. And then my other shadow colors, which are going to be a little bit warmer. So that's all I have so far. And then I have like a really rough sketch here that we were drawing like about 10 minutes before, trying to kind of concept my idea. So yeah, that's what we have so far. So I'm gonna get started.
Very cool. And Mike, I also want to check into, there are some questions in queue, and I want to ask you some questions from the audience too. Where's your comfort level in terms of just drawing and answering questions at the same time?
We're gonna find out.
All right. Okay, let's get started. So we have Gemma Dunn. I hope I said your name properly. But she says, I'm a graduate animator, but I would love to work in concept. However, there's so many good artists out there already. Any advice for someone like me who's new and scared?
Yeah, I totally understand your feelings. When I was kind of a student, I kind of had the same feeling as, feeling scared, not feeling comfortable, because everyone's so good. But I think the thing is to keep in mind is they may be good, but you're different. So oftentimes when you are jumping onto a new production, they won't only hire you because you're good. They're going to hire you because your ideas are different. So if you're going to be a concept artist or concept designer, a lot of the times you're producing ideas that no one else would produce. You know what I mean? So I think that is the thing to really keep in mind.
And how about you? You've shared some of your origin story as a concept artist, but you weren't always like, as some of us are, so as I know at least, I'm like, hey, you were a pre-med major several years ago. Like, let's talk about some of that and how you entered the art space.
Yeah, so funny enough, I had been drawing my whole life, like literally since I can remember. But then My parents are Nigerian. My dad is Nigerian. And so something that happened was, as every time I would get excited about doing art, which I didn't know was an actual career, my dad would be like, hey, no, you are going to be a doctor, a lawyer, there is nothing else. So I would oftentimes like kind of have this weird duel in the back of my head where I'm like, I want to do art, but my dad doesn't want me to do that. So I felt weird. So I stopped drawing for 10 years. I think it was around 10 or 8 years, which is the same thing. And to be 100% honest, one of my close friends who was on one of the other presentations with me, named Reggie Rockmore, he kind of showed me some work that he was doing, and I was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. And at the time also, I was dating someone who was totally not even an illustrator, but she showed me some of her like paintings, and I was like, I remember I used to do that. She was like, oh, you should get back into it. And I was like, yeah, no, that time has passed. But lastly, I remember someone really close to me, actually the guy who got me into video games, got me into art, got me into everything. Basically, I see him as a big brother. One of the big things he said before he passed was, oh man, you know, I really wish you would get back into that art thing. So all of those things combined kind of ignited something in me. And then I just luckily had a great mom as support who was like in the back of my ear, in my ear, like, you know, I know you're going to school to be a doctor, but I really wish you would get back into art. And I was like, you know what? And so I took a chance and applied to pre-med school as well as my art school. And I said, whatever happens, happens. And I got into art school first. So I took it there and went as far as I could. And, you know, it's great. I don't regret it whatsoever.
You're doing great. You're doing great, kid.
Thank you.
Shout out to the moms. Also, Jenny Uwandi, we love her.
Right? Mom is so cool. So gangster.
Okay, so we have another question right now. Let's talk about, let's see where we at here. What would you say the difference is between concept art and illustration? And this question is specifically for games and animation.
Ooh, okay. So concept art and illustration. I think either way you're designing when it comes to doing concept art and illustration, the difference is what you're designing. Oftentimes in illustration, you're designing a scene, right? So you're coming up with the idea of, oh, I'm going to I'm gonna compose an image with, you know, 10 people on screen fighting a gigantic golem or something, right? Golem. And that's cool, right? Oftentimes you can create and design while you're doing that too, but it's not the same. You'll be creating variations of an illustration. So thumbnails, showing different lighting cues and things of that nature. Whereas doing concept art, you're oftentimes, depending on what you're concepting, say if you're concepting characters, you're going to be doing a lot of designing multiple characters, multiple poses, different angles, and kind of going more into designing their clothes, what like their origin story and where they're coming from, and putting that all into something that someone can break down within like the second that they look at them. So it's like the difference between composing an image or designing an image and designing a character or designing an environment. That's how I would best describe it.
Cool, man. All right, what have we got here now?
So right now I'm playing with my warms and cools and I'm jumping into something that I know is going to give me confidence first. So I always do that. I'll pick like the smallest part and say like, okay, like, does that feel right? And once I feel good about that specific area, then I'll start to flesh out the rest of the painting. Not everyone works like that, and I wouldn't even suggest working like that. But the idea that I have in my head, thanks to Brandon, is ever fleeting. So I'm trying to capture it while it's in my head.
Talk about that. You said you start with the smallest part of a piece so that you can find the confidence. Talk about that some more.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, when do you know you're like, all right, this is it. I'm gonna move forward after this part.
For me, I'm usually capturing my light and shadow. And if I start on something like, say, the face, right, which is really complex, a complex form, I'm gonna be sitting there for a long time. So something like an arm is simply a tube. And I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, I can figure that out real quick. And so I already feel pretty confident about these warms and cools. I feel like without much rendering at all, that bow staff or whatever it's going to be, maybe it's going to be like, I'm going to talk about that later. But the bow staff is like simply a tube. So we all know that there's your light, your shadow, your terminator, or you can say your center light, your highlight, your terminator, your and your deep shadow, your core shadow, right? And then reflected light. So like generally to me, I like to work in twos. So I'll break things down into, say, two values, my light and shadow. If it reads well, which I'm looking at this small screen, if it reads well in that, then I know then I can introduce my third value. So it's not too different from like, if we go on a few dates and I have faith in you, then I can introduce you to my parents. Kind of the same way with the third value. So now I'm gonna start kind of playing with the idea of where exactly my light's coming from. I know that I want it to come from somewhat behind, so I'll kind of illustrate what that looks like in my head. I'm thinking maybe so it'll be coming, boom, from that angle. And when it comes to light, especially, I think the way I think of it is more like a splash of water, right? So as I talked about earlier, like the warms and cools side of things, I'm thinking if I had a bucket of water, right? And I wanted to dump it on this guy. And I say, maybe I want to dump it from the top. Well, if I'm thinking about it as cool light, right? Or cool water, he's going to be freezing right here where that water is hitting, right? And then the part that's not getting touched will be just a bit warmer than the part that the water is touching because it's not absolutely freezing. But what will happen is, depending on how hard that water is thrown, then that bounce light will splash right back up, right? But obviously it's not going to be as strong as the light, as the water that's being thrown at them. So it's going to just be a splash. And depending on how hard that light or that water is hitting, it's going to splash up even higher and be even stronger. So that's how I'm thinking about lighting in general.
As an artist too, there are so many different areas you can focus on to better your craft.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in your career, like what are those parts that you're focused on where you're like, I really need to get better at this thing or these specific things? Where do you find that challenge?
All the damn time. I feel like I'm constantly trying to put myself around people who I think are better than me in one shape or form. And what ends up happening is you start to accumulate different skill sets that you would have never thought about before. So for me, I think, you know, there's still things that trouble me quite a bit. Drawing hands, drawing feet, like easily. It takes a lot more concentration for me when I'm doing those things. Whereas if you're like, here, draw the arm or sit there and design something, usually I don't have to be 100% dialed in. But when it comes to certain parts, I'm like, oh, I could still get better at that. I think also just, it's always, every time I look at art like this, like every time I think I'm getting better, my eye gets better. So then I get worse. So my confidence is never going to stand still because your skill set and your eye are constantly battling. And the reason why it's important to constantly be building your eye is for that very reason. There's certain people who are like, I'm good. There's nothing else for me to learn. And it's like, man.
Definitely not the attitude to have.
Hits you hard, So I think like it's really good to constantly be inspired by others. I don't just look at concept art. I look at a lot of other things to constantly improve my eye, and just not really turning anything down, in the sense of, I'll look at fine art, which I love. I'll look at animation. I'll look at live action. I'll look at everything, even abstract art, which took me a long time to really truly appreciate and understand. But I did. And once I started to, I was like, I used to always look at that stuff and be like, I don't understand why people like this crap. This shit is pointless. But but
talk about the turning point too. Like
I think mine's was a crazy bridge. One of my favorite artists, if not my favorite, is an artist named Gustav Klimt. And he found a way to kind of combine fine art or academic art with nearly abstract art. And I remember being like, kind of amazed, but it took a while, like if it wasn't for that bridge, I probably would have never understood, because I would look at his work and I'm like, how is he doing this? Like, what is he doing? Why? And I feel like it took a long time. I used to even look at certain artists like not Da Vinci. What's his name? The guy who did the Starry Night. Can't remember right now, but he.
Why don't I remember either? I'm like, wait, hold on.
You know who I'm talking about? Van Gogh.
Yeah, there we go. I was like, oh wait, it's not Monet. It's the other one.
Yeah, and he. I remember looking at that work when I was like just starting out, and I was like, this is crap. But then I started to see it, and I'm like, well, there's nothing else that really looked like that at the time. And that's pretty impressive. But also there's like little subtleties in the things that he does. And I think that that's where it comes from, is understanding the subtleties of someone's work as opposed to just appreciating it as a whole. And so I kind of think, in my opinion, that everyone has like a special move, right? So there's some people who you'll look at and you're like, man, their lighting is amazing. I want to light like that. And then there's other people who are like, oh man, they have so much action in their pose, like in their poses and their work, so much energy. I want to be like that. And, kind of being able to appreciate a lot of that really helps. But also when you then look back at some of your favorite artists, like John Singer Sargent, his work is really abstract within figurative. So his work, though it looks like figurative from far, when you go up close, it's like beautiful abstractions of an arm or of a leg, even of a face sometimes. And I think that that's one of those things where you kind of have to increase your eye and allow yourself to appreciate other people's work and style, because that will eventually come into yourself, but it'll also kind of unlock the bonds that we oftentimes have when we're thinking about things like technique, right? Which are taught in school. And technique is good, it's great, but you learn technique to forget technique, in my opinion. And so, your whole job is really to be an artist, and to be an artist, you kind of have to be free. So that's one of the things that I really kind of figured out and started to enjoy.
You're just dropping gems all weekend. All these quotable sound bites that you have right now. You're like, to be an artist means to be free. You're learning technique. You're learning technique to forget technique. All these gems.
Thank you.
I'm just picturing a photo of you or a photo of your piece, and it's just a motivational poster. Just we're gonna put it all over the place. There's another lighting question. Hold on, I lost it for 1 second. Where are we at? Ooh, okay. Someone asked, when you're having trouble conceiving lighting from imagination, what's your go-to resource for lighting reference / inspiration?
Very good question. I have a few. I think sometime what I'll do is I can light a 3D model, right? Because I know how to do 3D. You can sit there and just light a 3D model and it's no big deal. I think the difference is that I'm not a great 3D artist. So it's almost the equivalent of me drawing stick figures in 3D, where it's like, oh yeah, I think this is good enough and I'll light it. But I think one of the most important parts to remember is when it comes to designing, drawing, you never take the 3D too seriously. So I'm glad that I'm not that great at 3D because it doesn't bog me down. I can just like look at it and be like, good enough, like that weird meme where the guy just like has his thumbs up, and kind of just move on from there without falling too in love with it. I think another thing, and I don't do this as often as I should anymore because I've gotten so comfortable being able to light in 3D, is kind of taking a picture of myself. The only thing that sucks about that though is, you know, say for example, because I think that this is a question I always wanted to know. Say for example, if I am painting Christina, right, and I use myself as reference, clearly me and her are different shades, right? So
I feel like I'm looking in a mirror, dude.
Right? I mean, actually, you know, we both kind of have the rim light like on the same side, like we got all of that going. But you know, generally speaking, that's where your color theory would come in, which I keep talking about because it took me so long to even understand color theory. Like, I still don't understand color theory. I feel like color is one of those things that you never truly understand until it's like over, until your life is over. It's such a complex thing. I think a lot of people say like, oh, color and value are the same. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily true. If you were to think about color and value is almost like the skeletal structure of a human being, right? But color is like your muscles, right? Yeah, they work well together, but they're not the same. So, and as you guys know, you know, skeleton systems, like what, 206 bones, but muscles are like a few thousand. So there's so many depths to color that generally when you see someone who is able to then play with color, that's where you're hitting, right? I think a lot of times we see people's work where it's kind of chalky, and that's usually, or muddy, and that's usually because the value and their color isn't in the right spot. So I think of this stuff as like, it's gonna sound terrible, but I feel like your light and your shadow, for example, are totally separate. They almost practice discrimination in the worst way, where your lightest lights and your darkest darks should never hit. They should never be in the same spot. So when I start to work in my shadow, right, this is probably the range that I'm gonna be in for my light. But even the darkest dark of my light should not be the same value as my dark, or even the lightest of my darks. It shouldn't intercede. So they should be totally separate. And I think that that's where people's work can get a little muddy or chalky, is from that exact thing. All right, so let's have a little bit of fun right now, but keep on with the questions.
Oh, yes. Okay, so this talk is called A Day in the Life of a Concept Artist. So of course we're getting questions about what is your daily routine as a concept artist?
You
Walk
know,
us through your
you know, it used to be so simple not that long ago, where I was like, oh, you know what? I go to the gym, I wake up at 6:30, I go to the gym, And then I'll come back, I'll have some tea, take a shower, and then from 8 to 12, not look at my phone whatsoever. I used to love those days, but that's unfortunately not how this goes anymore. Now with like having a company, and working for a really big company as well. That's not the way it works anymore. So it's kind of not so organized, but the framework is there, and the framework is definitely somewhere in those lines. Like, yeah, I wake up generally around 7. I don't speak from from 7 to 12. I don't use my words. And then I start to come alive around 12. That's when I'll start to answer my phone and stuff like that. Usually because I'm usually designing a lot. And when I'm designing, I need to be in a certain mindset. And usually words, or the use of words, does not allow me to be as free as I want within my mind, right? It's kind of like listening to this quiet voice in my head, and I can't be distracted too easily. It's just too easy for me to be distracted, because I do like to rant. If you can get me to rant, it'll be a long day.
This brings me to another question that is also very relevant. How do you find energy to work on personal art outside of work, if at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do a lot of my work in my sketchbook, if anything. That's usually what I'm doing. And I sketch a lot, but I don't get time to do finished work the way I used to, which saddens me. Sometime also I will kind of play around and start doing things piece by piece. Like, to be honest, during this LightBox Expo, while I was looking at some of the presentations, even while I was in some of the presentations, I was actually sketching, and I probably did like 4 or 5 like digital sketches that are probably like maybe at like 60% done. So I find time if I can, but generally I'm like in my sketchbook, because I enjoy the thought of exploring ideas more than exploring like a finished painting and stuff like that. Like, I like to think, especially because I feel like my mind is all over the place. So
Let's see what else. We've got so many good questions. Let's see what we've got. All right. I want to talk a little bit about 9B as well. Let's kind of start with the very beginning of how did 9B Collective come to fruition?
Oh, that's a funny one. So there's a whole bunch of different ways. And I feel like that's why it was meant to be. Phil and Alice all had these ideas totally separate. And funny enough, I know I was thinking about this stuff since I don't even know how long. Like, like I said, one of the people who were closest to me, he said like, yo, I really wish that we can do a company together. And I know for myself, I was always like, oh man, like I really wish there was a spot where, I wish I had the support that I wanted coming up. For Phil's side, he kind of led something called like a drink and draw also, where he, the year prior, he was, kind of surprised at how it was like for Black History Month, actually. And he was really surprised at how many Black people came to that event. And we're like, damn, you know what? Like, for as long as I've been working and for as long as he's been working, I don't recall ever working with another Black person, like ever, right? And so sometimes what happens is you feel kind of monolithic in the sense where you're kind of expected to have all the answers. Meanwhile, you're too scared to really speak up because you don't have the backup or the support. Like we're not monolithic in the sense of, I don't know every single thing about every single person in my culture, and no one does, right? So it's kind of, it kind of becomes unfair when the numbers aren't there. But also, to be honest, I just feel like there's something that we need in general, minorities in general, to kind of have that. Like, I think a lot of Nigerian, especially, but a lot of African, a lot of Asian artists who I know, a lot of Hispanic artists who I know, it always comes down to parents thinking that it's not a viable option. And it's like, it's a viable option, and it's definitely a hell of a lot safer to actually start to participate in the arts, because so many people have this amazing skill so early and then they drop it. And they usually drop it because it's not cool, or, you know, they don't feel like it's an actual job and things like that. So we wanted to show, for number one, that it's a viable option. Number two, we wanted people to be able to work together, because I feel like there's a lot of power in that. In general, you know, more and more content is becoming more diverse, right? But now it's also becoming more specific. So with that being said, we definitely want to make sure that as we push for specificity, we also push for diversity and building up the skill sets of some of these artists that maybe have not gotten a chance. You know, also, when I was at Art Center, I know I didn't get too many chances, just simply based on not my skill set, shockingly enough, which would have been fine, but more so based on the fact that there was a lack of familiarity culturally. And so I would never want anyone to feel like that. That sucks. So we want to provide a spot where all of those things can kind of come true, and giving people a chance to kind of prove themselves instead of waiting for them to have 10 years of experience and then saying, all right, yeah, I think you're ready, you know?
Yeah, I think you bring up such a good point, because a lot of it is, I mean, working in the games industry too, I didn't know games could be a career, because also just as a kid, my background itself is in journalism. They're like, well, guess you're going to be, my parents were like, guess you're going to be living with us forever. And then eventually working in entertainment and then getting into the games industry. It's just something where it just seems so far-fetched, but so much of what is out there right now, the technology that's out there, the type of educational resources that are out there for aspiring artists and creators is just so much more vast. But you bring up a good point, because you talk about, when you talk about wanting to make this space for 9B, like a space for those who want to enter the industry, like so much of it is about accessibility too. And art school's hella expensive, man.
Like, oh my God.
Dude.
It's like not even right.
Dude. Yeah, it truly, art school can truly bring about that starving artist mentality. And yeah, so I think with 9B especially, and speaking to it, to what I've witnessed from you, Phil, and Aldous, it's, you guys make yourself so accessible for people who have these questions. Like you lend people your time, and that is a huge thing, because I think breaking through that barrier to just be able to learn from people who are already doing it and seeing people who look like you that are doing it is such a game changer.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big thing. I know for myself, I used to feel so awkward reaching out to people, and I never want to forget that feeling either, because I feel like it's one of those things where you get so scared of reaching out that you end up never reaching out and never getting the answers that you are looking for. And so I've been there, and I hated that feeling with a passion, just being like, oh, you know, like now, you know, once you get a few rejections, it's so hard to get out of your own head and say, oh yeah, no, like, you know, not everyone is like that. You kind of just start to get a little nervous and a little scared. So for myself, I was definitely like on the nervous side of reaching out. And so I just never want someone to feel like that.
Yeah. And when you're reaching out to people, there's the part where you're reaching out and having that networking side, but also there's the part where you're reaching out and building your portfolio too. Like, can you talk about both of those? Like, hey, basically cold calling and cold reaching out to people that you might not know, and also building the right type of portfolio. How do those two go hand in hand?
That's a really good one. I think for myself, I kind of played it a lot more strategic. I would go to everything. I would listen to everyone and everything that they had to say. And I would really take it seriously in the sense of I would put my work up to other artists who I admired. And I would be like, I'm not going to approach this person until I feel like I'm at least relatively close. And so I think that that's one of those things to keep in mind is, you know, yeah, it's good to get criticism, but when it comes to getting criticism for a job, there's different ways to kind of go about it. I would take certain classes in a certain order to make sure that by the time I met up with, you know, someone I really admired, they wouldn't give me the same criticism that someone else would have. Like, there's nothing worse. You almost have to treat it like, I compare everything to something. You almost have to treat it like it's a video game and like you only have a few potions, right? You don't want to just use up your potions for the simplest or for the silliest reason. So for myself, I would be like, all right, if I approach Christina and say, hey, look at my portfolio. And then she says, well, you really need to work on your lighting. I'm going to work on my lighting before showing it to someone else, because what would happen if you then show it to Brandon Lane? He's going to be like, you should work on your lighting. Now you just literally used up 2 potions when it should have only taken 1. So I tried to do that where I would ask the people who, well, this could be a cool cut. Sorry. I would ask the people the questions, and then I would make sure that I did exactly what they said. And something that actually happened almost years later was when I got hired at a certain mystical place. A lot of the people who worked there were my teachers at one point. And they were like, oh yeah, I remember Mike. He was a great student. He always does exactly what you say when you tell him to do it. And it was like, oh wow, that got me one of the jobs of my dreams, you know? So it's kind of funny how that works, but you know, you kind of want to remember that, like, people remember you, whether for the best or for the worst, but you definitely don't want to be the guy who's like, you don't want to be the person where they're like, yeah, he never listens or she never listens. That's like, that's terrible.
Oh, that's a deep cut.
Yeah.
So 9B specifically, can you talk about some of the different projects the teams working on and what that looks like, how you go about selecting artists for those projects?
Yes, so there's a few ways. I think one of the big ways is we do a lot of searching online and things of that nature. And we even do, reach outs, especially. And sometimes, or all of the time, it almost always comes down to, yo, I reached out to this person. He was super cool. Let's put him on the roster. I've also had times where it's been like someone is really good, but they kind of came off as like not so cool. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm gonna leave that alone, So a lot of times we go through Instagram, we go through our station, we go through all these sites, and we find people that way. And we pretty much have like a long list of people who we've been, looking at, and we're just waiting for, maybe there'd be something like small, like, oh, like this person's almost there, but not quite yet, but we're going to keep an eye on them. Things like that, I think, help a lot. So generally when we're putting teams together, we're really looking at the styles that they're working in and kind of saying like, oh, you know what? I think that this person will be really good for this job, or this person will be really good for that. And that's usually how it goes.
And also I want to take this time to talk about a form that the 9B team has put together. So if y'all visit our Instagram at 9B Collective and click on the link in our bio, you'll see a few items that you can select from. And there's one that says, fill out this form to learn more about 9B Collective. So for those of y'all that have been messaging the account to ask about how you can get more information or get involved or even get your portfolio potentially looked at, there's a form there where you can provide all that information, your name, your email, a link to your portfolio. Please, 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 I can't emphasize that enough. For those actually interested in, if you express an interest in 9B, please provide your portfolio so that our team has something to look at. Just saying that you're interested is awesome and we appreciate that, but also we need to be able to see work as well, because 9B is a concept art studio. So we definitely want to look at art from folks when we're evaluating artists as well.
I actually want to touch on that because that was a really good point, and I kind of brought it up. I brought it up before in one of the other talks, but this definitely needs to be said again. I think that when it comes to reaching out to people, right? Like, because I had to learn this skill myself. It's really important that you understand that most people don't have time, right? Like, you know, Christina has multiple things going on. I have multiple things going on. Phil has multiple things going on. And so generally expect that most of the time, your art director who you're reaching out to has a million things going on. So a skill that I learned by emailing 1,000,001 people has been to constantly, when I would hit someone up, I would shorten that email as much as I can. It would be like, hey, my name is, this is what I want to do. The reason why I'm contacting you is because please check out my work here. And all of it was like less than a paragraph. I got to a point where it almost became an art where I would have that thing, like it would be 4 lines max. And I would space it out in a certain way so it doesn't look like when someone opens it up, they're overwhelmed, because that can happen too. You're like, whoa, this is a lot of verbal vomit. I just not even gonna read it. You wanna make sure that you're being very precise with your words and making sure that, you know, it's almost showing common courtesy, where you're kind of thinking about someone else. You're like, hey, I know you don't have time. Oops. This is always a nightmare when you throw the wrong thing on the wrong layer. But you want to make sure that like you're understanding, like, hey, I know you don't have time, so let me make this easy for you. And I used to do that a lot. Is I would just try and make it as easy for the person I'm trying to contact as possible. To say, hey, and they would oftentimes reply. And I noticed that change in things when it got to a point where in the beginning, no one was replying, and then everyone would reply. So I think that that's one of those things to think about, is making sure that when you contact people, you're very precise with how you're very conscious of how you're like informing them what you want to do or what you want from them.
Yeah, it certainly goes both ways, because people can feel that energy through your email too. Like, people are not obligated to reply to you, but if you're speaking to them in a respectful and courteous manner, and it's like you're expressing interest but also an appreciation for time, chances are someone's going to reply to you. But if an email comes off as like this person is almost obligated, or it feels like they owe you something, then that puts kind of that just kind of puts a wrench in the mix.
Oh yeah.
And you can definitely feel the energy, whether like you can feel the energy through email, you can definitely feel the energy through like an in-person too. So, so yes, keep it short and sweet, but please include your portfolio. And also, Mike, for 9B specifically, because y'all are working on so many different projects, how can folks build a portfolio that is reflective of what 9B is looking for right now? And that can change later on, but in the near future.
Yeah. Damn, that was a really good question.
Oh, thanks. That was mine.
Too good. Too good. I don't like it. That was a really good question. I think a lot of the times, I know the real thing everyone says is, oh, well, you know, try and cater your work to an employer. And that's one thing for sure. I think another thing though is also doing what feels natural to you. Because what you don't want is to be in a situation where you're doing work that is not reflective of your skill set, because it'll always come off flat, no matter what. So, you know, for example, I do a lot of dark, moody things. I'm a dark, moody person. I'm playing. But kind of. But I think that a lot of the jobs I get nowadays, they're like, hey, can you do that thing that you do? I'm like, oh, well, please. Yeah. So I think like a lot of the times when you are doing you and you're doing you to the best of your ability, the work finds you. So we'll find you.
I was waiting for you to continue, but you just kind of mic dropped at the end right there. So
yeah, I felt like that was like really on point. I was like, oh.
pat yourself on the back for that one. Okay, let me see what questions we've got here. All righty. So you've talked a lot about some of the work you've done and have kept these company names very hush hush. For those who are less familiar with you or even your work, talk about some of that. Like we can look at Instagram right now and see that you recently released some concepts from Ahsoka.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the different work you've been doing.
So I do a lot of my work now for Marvel biz dev, which has been a dream come true. But even prior to that, I've worked on things like Star Wars, Mandalorian, which is really cool, really fun project, intense. I worked on Star Trek, Picard. I've worked on Westworld, season 3. Really fun. Worked on things like Goosebumps, worked on a few video games. Yeah, kind of been around the block and then some within a short period of time. I would often take like 3 or 4 jobs at a time. So I was kind of able to build up my resume relatively quick. Not that I would recommend that, but that's something that I was able to do and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, but currently I've been at Marvel for about 2 years now, which the time just kind of passes by. And so I've been loving it there.
How did Marvel come to be? Like, how did you even get your start there?
Man, well, I could tell you the real story. I could tell you the cutesy version of it, but I think like it was kind of planned in my head, and then it luckily came to fruition. I think my goal was to always come into to work at Marvel, and one of the cool things that happens is, you know, people teach. And so I was really lucky enough to, so I had a plan in my head. The plan was I'm going to take the classes of everyone at Marvel whenever they would teach, and I would just try and learn as much as I could. But before I would take those classes, I would have to eat my vegetables first. And by eating my vegetables, I'm referring to, I would do things like, oh, I'm going to take an anatomy class. I'm going to take an anatomy class, and then I'll, you know, take a class with John Stock, or I'm going to take a perspective class, and then I'll take a class with Kevin Chin. And I would do that. And by the time, as I mentioned, like by the time I got in there, everyone, like almost everyone was like, oh yeah, he was my student at one point. It's like, yeah, I was. but that's what it comes down to, is like kind of having a plan, right? And I always think about it in the sense of, you know, I compare it to something that I'm always familiar with. So for me, sometimes I'll compare it to like something like working out, right? I'm like, okay, well, you know, you're not going to be able to bench 325 right away. You have to ease into it by working out all the other muscles to eventually get to that point, right? Like you can't just work on your chest all the time and say, yeah, eventually, like you have to work on everything. It's a whole unit. And so I would treat it like that, where I would be like, all right, you know what? I'm lacking in this. I need to build this before I deserve to take a class with Kevin Shin again. And that's how I would kind of map it out. Did that even answer the question?
I mean, I think so. If folks have follow-ups on this, they can certainly ask. So we'll get into it. There's another really, really good question.
Mm-hmm.
This person asked, do you have any tips for staying physically healthy and not hurting your arm or back after drawing for hours?
That's hilarious because it's funny for so many reasons, but one of the main reasons is it was funny because I'm like, oh, I'm not usually sitting the way I usually would sit while I'm working. I sit in the worst way. I literally will sit there. I'll have one leg up like this. I'm just drawing just like that for like long periods of time. I'm just like in my most relaxed state. Just, it's terrible. Don't do that. But I'm doing it right now, but don't do this.
Okay, so what good advice can you offer for people?
The good advice I would say is one thing that I know for myself is I work out like every other day. Now, it used to be I would work out every day, but I don't have the time for that anymore because these old bones, you know. But I work out every other day, and then on the weekends, very early morning, I'll go on a bike ride. And so the reason why I did that is because I was looking at a lot of the artists who were older than me, and they weren't even that much older than me, but they were old enough. And I would see these physical ailments that they would have. And I was like, nope. Prevention is a lot more important than, you know, just simply fixing the issue. So I was like, I'm going to avoid these things at all costs. And so I would just very much so get ahead of it. So I think like in reality, you only need to really work out like at least 30 minutes a day, they say. But you can work out for a good like, you know, hour every other day, and kind of get to where you want to get to that way too. But I try and make sure that I'm doing things that will require movement because a body in motion stays in motion.
Dang, another gem. What sort of workouts do you do? What activities do you apart from biking?
So actually, me and Christina Pham here, we rock climb, miss rock climbing. We have to do that this week.
Oh my God, we gotta go. We gotta go. Come on, man.
Yeah.
The gym misses you.
Yes. We rock climb, which is to me one of the better ones. And the reason why I say that is because you know, art, especially in design, you're oftentimes using your mind, right? So the reason why I like rock climbing, because every time I was mention rock climbing to people, they always get so scared. They're like, I don't know about that, man. That seems hard. And it's like, dude, there's levels to it for a reason. But one of the things about rock climbing is it forces you to think. And so to me, it's very much like you're problem solving while working out. And it makes it really fun You know, like going to the gym, it's cool, but it's not, it can get boring very quickly. So that's one of the things that I would say. I would work out doing rock climbing. I would go to the gym. I go I don't go running anymore, so that's painful now. I would, do little things. I would even play pickleball, which I've been trying to get Christina to join someday. Christina and Hefe, that'd be dope. But they make fun of me all the time because they're like, "That's."
I don't make fun of you. No, what are you talking about? I make fun of the fact that the people there school you in pickleball.
Destroying me.
Yeah.
I be getting destroyed by like the older peeps, and it's great. It's always good to humble yourself. I think another thing if you want to get humbled is do jujitsu. That'll always. That's one sport that just
Big
keeps
time.
on giving. So
talk about body awareness in rock climbing. Body awareness in jujitsu is just a whole another playing field too.
It seriously is. But I think it's so great because I think the more humble you are, the more understanding you are of your weaknesses, and that can relate right back to art. I think a lot of the times, that awareness of, simply being like, I suck. That's great. That's a good spot to be in. It's good to understand that you still have time to grow. But it's also very easy to get full of yourself if you are working on a lot of cool projects and stuff like that. So the way that you can humble yourself is always stepping outside of your comfort zone and getting destroyed. I get destroyed professionally, but I still get destroyed every week. So, and getting destroyed professionally means I'm doing things outside of my comfort zone for as long as I can get away with it. And then once it's time for me to turn it in, I go right into what I know is going to get the job done on time.
Hell yeah. It's humbling yourself is about removing that ego. I mean, ego is always going to be there, but finding the balance in your ego is going to take you further and further.
100%.
So we have another question from Renee, I believe. So this person asked, "Hey, Mike, I'm building a League of Legends splash art portfolio around my skins designs. Do you think that if my designing skills are not the best, that's going to hurt my portfolio, or should I not worry about it?"
So if I'm hearing correctly, you're saying that you're working on a splash screen type of thing, right?
That is going to be my assumption because League of Legends has their illustration team with all the different skins and the illustration team and the splash artists or the splash skins. Yeah.
So that's a really good question. This is what I would say. If your design skills, I'm gonna be 100% honest because I believe in honesty when it comes to criticism. If your design skills are not the best, that will hurt. Not the best, as in if they're bad. Honestly, if they're bad, it's gonna hurt you. You definitely want to be in a spot where you don't want them to get distracted with the BS. So I know for myself, this was a lesson I had to learn from personally, where I would sit there and I would be like, yeah, I'm gonna design this really cool thing. And I'll put so much effort into designing because that's what I like to do. And then my presentation would be so ass. So people would be like when people would look at my portfolio in the very beginning, they'll be like, yo, son, this is not like, they wouldn't even look at it because my presentation was so bad. And I would be so annoyed because I'm like, why the hell does this presentation crap matter anyway? Like, I just want to draw. I'm clearly doing a decent design, what is it? And I understand that, similar to speaking, it's not always about what you say, it's about how you say it, unfortunately. That's what people gravitate towards. And it's the same thing with your design. So you don't want to, what I would say is you don't want to leave anything for someone to complain about. That's one. Two is you never want to if you look at something and say it's bad, this is a lesson I'm teaching myself every single day. I swear. Any day you're like, yo, this is pretty rough, someone is going to look at it and be like, son, that's pretty rough. And I used to have a friend very early in my art journey where I always do this too. I like to pair up with other people and just like crit each other. We would just, have that secret person that we would send work to. And every time, I swear to you, every single time, I would look at my work and I'll be like, yeah, I know that arm is a little off, but I don't feel like doing it. And every time I would send my work to that dude, he'll be like, yeah, this looks cool, and then he'll zoom in on the part and he'll be like, you really thought you could get away with that, huh? And I'm like, oh no, you see that? And he's like, yeah, I see it. And he would just, every single time I would get the scolding of my life because I was too lazy to just change the little things. So it's kind of funny because, I think it's a good idea to just be aware that if you see something, everybody sees it when it comes to your art. Because as I mentioned earlier, your eye, right, is very, very important. And, what most people don't recognize, it even took me a while, and I'm still understanding it now, is that if you're looking up to somebody and you think that you see something, they see it for real. Like their eye is even more advanced than yours is going to be, most likely. So they're going to see every little flaw, every little thing that you're doing, and they're going to be like, yeah, nah. Right? So where did this little man come from? Oh, yeah. Well, he could stay there for a while. But yeah, like I would see, and it would be crazy because then I remember I would get crits because I very much would show my work to a lot of people. I still do. No, I don't. But I would show my work to a lot of people and I'll be like, hey, like, what do you think? And they would give me their honest criticisms and they would be like, yeah, this is wrong, or, perspective's a little off or whatever. And what would end up happening is once my eye developed, I was like, oh shit, I can't believe I was showing this. I totally understand what they were talking about. It's like one of the most awkward feelings because you just have to understand that like most professionals, their eye is so upper tier that they're gonna see it all of it. So
I think go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the end of that.
I think this takes it back to a talk you had a couple of days ago with Reggie and Mikkel, but you're talking about following your gut. So if you see something wrong with your art, expect that the person you're showing it to is way better than you. But also you want that person to be way better than you because that's also how it helps you as an artist, and that helps you grow as an artist. So
100%. Yeah. And I want to piggyback off of that too. Yeah, like those people are gonna have a little bit more insight. And I had a thing, I don't know where I got it from, but kudos to whoever gave me the idea. When I was in school, I was like, I'm gonna fail as fast as possible. And so by that, I mean, when you're learning something, you don't recognize how much of your process or how fast you get good comes from your ability to fail, right? And you fail, you learn lessons. So that being said, I would try and do things that I know were outside of my comfort zone. If someone was watching and I'm sending my stuff to get critiqued, I would send it to people and they'll be like, oh, work on your values. Oh, work on this. Oh, work on that. And I would keep working on those things and I would just keep on adding. So for example, this really happened, real story. I would take a perspective class, and when I was taking that perspective class, I was, he said the first 2 weeks, you guys just have to, you can use marker to do value. but you can also do line after 3 weeks. It was a 10-week or 14-week, can't remember, course. And so while everyone else stopped using their markers for their values, I kept using my markers for my values. And so he would crit me on not only my drawing, but my values as well. And so that was really helpful for me because I was getting better and better faster, because he was always critiquing me, and I was always doing the extra work to get critiqued, So I think that's something to think about, is always put yourself in those positions where you can learn, and understand that the people who are critiquing you are trying to actually help you. So I know it's very easy to, it's so easy to like get offended when someone gives you like a raw critique, but understanding that they're actually doing you a favor is pretty important.
As you were making your way through the industry too, like something I know about you is that it's easy to read your face and see the different facial expressions that you have when you're potentially reacting to something that someone is saying. But when you started out in the industry and taking in that critique, how did you find that way of processing it so it wasn't just like, oh my gosh, this person is totally offended that I wouldn't take their feedback after they were trying to help me? Where did you find that common ground or balance for yourself?
For that kind of stuff, I just never really took it personally. I would make sure that I would go up to people and I would literally tell them, give me the rawest crit you could possibly give me, like every single time. That's how I would introduce myself. When I would ask for a crit, I would be like, hey, can you show me absolutely no mercy? Because I also understand that there's a lot of nice people in the industry. And some of them are a little nervous to be very honest. And so I would always kind of be like, hey, can you please just show me no mercy? One artist almost just wrecked my life in a great way. I remember just being like messed up for like a whole week. I don't want to always tell the story, so you could probably like see some of the old talks I've had, and I've mentioned the name there. But yeah, I asked him for a really raw crit, and it was almost like he was waiting for this his whole life, and he was like, I've been waiting for this shit. He just like laid all the way into me, and I swear to you guys, I was like, my heart, like I was like in a weird place. I don't even know how to really describe it. I was like somewhere in between zones, somewhere in between life, where for about a week, I was like wrecked. I was second guessing everything. But once I recovered from it, oh, it was over. Like it was such a great experience for me to allow someone who I respected so highly to totally destroy me.
Yeah, and this was and if I'm remembering correctly, this is the advice that pretty much was a game changer for you as an artist in the industry.
100%.
I'm picturing your eyes just welling up like an anime, just trying to keep it together. Similar. It
was totally Vegeta eyes, I promise you. I was like, how can you do this to me? Like it was like one of those. It was rough. It was really rough in those streets that day. I was like, I locked myself in the room. It was rough. I loved it.
There's just the whole montage playing around you. Like
Yep. It was. I swear it was. I feel like it was. It's like
so I'm watching the YouTube right now and I see that we have Philip Boute in the house.
Big boot.
Oh yes. We also got Rockmo in the chats.
Rockmo. That's the guy. One of the guys.
Oh yeah. We also have Brandonian Syndrome in the chat.
Brandonian Syndrome. That's my boy. Yeah. So funny thing, I call Brandon Big Bro, right? And you know, I've known him since forever. Like literally, I met him and Reggie when I was a wee lad, and we were such nerds. Like we were such nerds in a time when it was not okay to be a nerd. But the thing that I really appreciate about Brandon is he's a constant, just like he's such a giving soul. And when I wanted to like really get into art, and I was like, okay, you know what? I think I'm gonna take this seriously. He's the guy who taught me Photoshop, actually. I had a really, and I don't know if he remembers this story, but not only did he give me my first Wacom tablet, and kind of really supported me, he also helped me find my first art school as well. And the cool thing about him as well is when I took a class where the teacher, in the nicest way, had her biases, right? And she wouldn't teach people who looked a certain way. And so half of my class, it was like maybe a quarter of my class were a certain group, and the other quarter, the other 75% was another group, and she would constantly ignore that other group. So eventually the people began to drop off, right? And well, what eventually happened is I was like kind of complaining about it to Brandon, and he was like, you know what? Let me show you some tricks that I know. You know, he's always going to be humble, so he's going to be like, I don't know much, but, and he pretty much showed me like the whole damn program. And from there, I learned so much, and I was like, damn, this dude really looked out. If it wasn't for him, I 9 times out of 10 wouldn't be doing this. So big ups to B. But yeah, it's a big deal of surrounding yourself with good people. And I try and do that. I'd rather be alone than be around crappy people. So I think that's something we should all strive for. So be more like Brandon, my friends.
Let's see. Got another question here. All right. So to break into concept work, will I need to do work that is an antithesis to my style? Meaning, if you like to draw moody things, dark moody things, would you need to take any job regardless of theme if you are new? Sounds like this person is looking to enter the industry or is very early on in their career.
Copy.
Is what it's coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I personally, yeah, you definitely have to adapt, right? And I definitely adapt. Because I also like drawing happy stuff. Like, funny enough, no one's ever seen I think Christina's probably the only person who's seen my personal work. Like, as of late, it's like the softest stuff ever. But what I do for work is all moody, because I'm more so moody most of the time than I am super happy. So with that being said, you definitely should try and kind of put it through the filter, but it still needs to remain you. And I hope that makes sense. That's really tough to explain, but you know, I'll do something dark and moody, but I'll also do something really exciting and like, you know, happy. But it'll still have something in there that would essentially allow someone to look at the work and be like, oh, that's Mike, right? Like, you can tell people's work from like a mile away once their style develops. Like, I can always tell Phil's work from anyone, right? And I can always tell Reggie's work from anyone. I can always tell Brandon's work from anyone. It's, you know, we all have a style, whether we want to believe it or not. So ultimately what I'm saying is, yeah, you're going to definitely have to kind of adapt, because that is part of the job. Your job is to adapt, right? Just like I'm trying to adapt to drawing something that is revolving around a chicken somehow. But you have to adapt, and it'll always come out through your filter.
Okay, so we've got a very particular question that has come up multiple times at this point, so I must ask it. A certain individual asked, how do you deal with being so handsome all the time?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think about it.
Can you walk us through that process of your handsomeness and what that means?
Is someone trying to make me blush on camera? May they burn. Taking care of yourself is pretty important while doing this job. So definitely do that. That's it. The end. I don't want any more details. But yeah, I think I just want to talk about like the taking care of yourself a bit because it's really important. I think our industry especially tends to kind of support the grind or support the like hustle, and that's cool too. I definitely support that, but I definitely think that it's important to really take care of yourself and like make sure that your health doesn't fail, because what you may sometimes fail to realize is your mind and your spirit are connected, but so is your body, right? So when you're feeling like crap inherently, your work, you may not be producing your best. And so it's definitely important to take care of yourself. Also, notice the name of this brush is Unbreak My Heart. It's one that is rarely used, but when I use it, it means business.
You talk about, we have about a little less than 10 minutes left, but I do want to circle back to earlier where at one point you were talking about how you have 3 to 4 jobs or you're working on 3 to 4 gigs at the same time. And that like is pretty much you putting in way more than full time. If I remember, you were working 12 to 14-hour days, which is a lot. Like, can you talk about how you found that balance, if at all, within that time, and how you came to find that balance afterwards?
Bro, there was no balance. I was dying. I was dying. Look, I want to keep it 100 with you guys because I want you guys to truly know how bad this is. I am probably one of the most healthy people I've ever known in my life, right? And I didn't notice because I was obsessed with my craft, in which I still am obsessed, but I control it now. And when I look at pictures of myself, when I thought I was taking care of myself from that era, oof, I would have never known. And what it came down to is I started to tell people, yo, how did you let me fall that hard? You didn't tell me. I started to blame everybody else. I was like, yo, you let me die. You let me. So
Yo, we interventioned you. Come on.
Yeah, no, for real though. Like seriously. It was a real thing. And I was probably my most unhealthy, definitely my most unattractive time. I gained weight and stuff like that. And I literally was like, I can't gain weight. It's impossible. And then, so basically what I'm saying is make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because the industry, when you die, it will move on. So make sure that, you are doing what you have to do to keep yourself alive, right? It's really important. I can't stress that enough. Embrace the grind, but also embrace taking care of yourself.
Oh, yes. It starts with self. I also do want to call out that Phil suggests also taking care of yourself means putting on lotion. So just
I knew it.
It's just I had to point that out.
Totally understand. Phil is a good example of someone who knows how to take care of himself, though. When you look at that dude, his skin is like always glowing. It's like, what? Like, how is this possible? Be like Phil in that respect. That dude knows how to take care of himself.
There's a hashtag in the chat for hashtag be like Brandon, given that he's very much helped you grow a career, but now I will probably see the hashtag be like Phil too.
Something funny about Brandon is Brandon, despite his age, has not aged at all. like since I've known him, and I'm like, well, clearly Brandon's taking care of himself too. So be like Brandon also. So as you guys can see, I'm gonna start collapsing layers. So something I'm doing now is this whole painting was more of a light color thing because I think you guys can kind of see where this is going in the sense of it's not done by a long shot. But when I look at it from here, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks rendered, but it's actually very little rendered in this respect. So, and I'll probably continue on with this when I do it for personal work and probably post it by, I don't want to give you guys no promises because life is hard, but
don't commit to it just yet.
Yeah. Not going to commit to it just yet, but I'm gonna just play with some small minute details in the meantime. I don't know why I thought we had more time.
Yeah, dude, time just flew by super quickly.
It really
Any parting, first off, thank you so much for everyone who joined us for this art demo. Thanks for all of y'all who asked questions. We're so sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We wish we had way more time. However, before I toss it back to our Wacom team, do you have any parting words, Mike?
I guess because this is something that I know if I was watching, I would be like, what the hell? I want to know this, man. I think one of the things is I'll just kind of let you guys know what I'm actually doing and how I'm thinking about things. In the sense of this design, in the sense of this painting, just so you guys don't feel cheated by not seeing a finished image. Also know that I'm very masochistic when it comes to myself. Christina knows that I will I will burn myself to do something to a certain level. But with that being said, so essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at it like this, which is also me looking at it like this, right? And you see how small that is. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm picking a bias and I'm saying, you know what? I want to play in the light side, right? So what does that mean? Most of my details are in the lights. My darks are not so much detailed. It's almost like you can barely see what's happening there, right? And of course, I would add, continuing on, I would add little indications of something here, just kind of playing with my darks and being like, oh, like, you know, sign here. It's like very faint, right? But then in my lights, it's very easy to see where this is going. And so I'm playing with that idea, but I'm also trying to kind of design on the fly while also playing with things like, it's all about subtlety, my friends. Playing here, which is like a relatively warm area. The closer your shadow is to a surface, the warmer it gets, and the further it gets away, the cooler it gets. So you notice that color change there, right? And that's kind of what I'm playing with. So I'm doing all these things, kind of keep in mind, because white is like the hardest color. I swear, to me, white is the hardest color to paint. And why did I pick something white to paint? Because I'm a masochist and I am trying to destroy myself right before your very own eyes, live. That's what I do. But it helps me improve. So basically that's what I'm doing. That's how I'm thinking. I'm kind of thinking while talking. It's a very fun journey. But that's some of the things I'm doing. Also just kind of developing everything else around the main focus, which is going to be the face. And now I'm having fun and I feel like we're just warming up. So I might end up just working on this damn thing till the end of the day. And then I might post it very, very soon. The other thing I'm thinking about is my planes, right? So I'm thinking about my light, as I indicated here, is coming from like the side. So he's basically, someone is splashing water on him from the side while he's sleeping. He's not too happy about that. So I'm thinking about like, okay, Well, you see how if this light is hitting here, it will cut across that form, right? This form right here is probably the most detailed bit, but it's actually not. And the reason why it looks detailed is because the way this form or the shadow is following this form. So it's boom, water's hitting here, it's drizzling, boom, and it's following this plane and it's cutting in. And then eventually what would happen is it would continue here. But this area would be warm because it's so close to this plane here. And so I'm kind of thinking about it like that. I'm thinking about how this will cut. I'm also thinking about, boom, this headpiece. If this is hitting from this angle, following the light, bam, right there, right? So all these things are like going on while we're talking. And lastly, I guess a little thing that's fun to know is when you're thinking about your light and shadows and thinking about the segregation, separation that's happening here, you're thinking about where that texture is going to be, right? So as I mentioned, if I'm a camera, when you take a picture of yourself, whether it's through your phone or through a professional cam, you're going to notice that the lens also has a bias. So you can obviously select like, oh, I want it to be in the light side or I want it to be in the dark side. And that's where your detail will be. But your texture generally is going to be right in between. So the way I try and remember that is almost like saying there's, Christina's truth, and then there's Mike's truth, and then probably the truth really lies somewhere in between. So I'm kind of showing here that just doing little things like that, if your texture is around your Terminator area, then that's where the texture is really going to read the best. It's not necessarily going to be all over the place like that. So yeah, that's what I have so far as that. Hopefully I gave you guys something that you can take with you. Because I know, especially when it comes to lighting and color and painting, people tend to charge for that kind of stuff. And you don't find out the truth about most of this stuff until way, way, way beyond your time. But hopefully these are things that'll keep staying in the back of your head. And then when you finally utilize it, you'll be like, that's what he was talking about. Because that happens to me all the damn time.
Dude, this has been so freaking awesome. For those of you who have outstanding questions still and we didn't get to them, please feel free to submit them via the link in 9B Collective social media. So at 9B Collective on Instagram, there's a form you can fill out in there, DM us questions, and at some point in the later TBD future, we'll do an AMA with at least one of the co-founders of 9B so that we can get all your questions answered. And we'll definitely keep a running list of them so that we know what people want to hear about. So again, follow 9B Collective on at 9B Collective, and also follow Mike Uwandi on Instagram at Black Bear Uwandi. Yeah. So we also want to thank LightBox Expo online for giving us this space to do an awesome art demo, and Wacom for hosting us as well.
Yes. And if you guys have any other questions, hit me up via the Instagrams. I'll be there. Yeah, that's it. That's all I really have, honestly.
Okay. Can we also, you and I, get very close to the camera so that our team can take a photo?
Yes.
Okie dokie. Alrighty, I'm going to toss it back to our Wacom team. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and have an amazing last day of Lightbox.
Please do.
Outstanding. you goddamn right.
I want to be counted. Do that shit, do that shit, do it. I say what I done.
What was that a threat?
Some of us could be killed.
Welcome back.